One of the most misunderstood dynamics in male-female attraction is the presence of mixed signals. People tend to misread them as outright disinterest or emotional instability, but that's often not the case. In fact, when a woman is craving you but hiding it, whether consciously or unconsciously, mixed signals are usually the first thing you'll notice. She'll be warm and playful with you one day, and then cold or distant the next. And it's easy to conclude that she's just not into you. But if you look a bit deeper, you'll find there's a psychological complexity at work here that isn't about disinterest. It's about internal conflict. She may want you deeply, but doesn't feel safe wanting you. Maybe she's had experiences in the past where showing interest made her vulnerable to being used, or worse, ignored. So now, instead of being straightforward, she plays it safe. She lets the desire flicker to the surface, just briefly, before pulling it back down under the surface again. That flicker might come as a compliment that feels a little too personal, a glance that lingers a second too long, or a tone in her voice that shifts when she's around you. And just as you start to pick up on it, just as you're about to respond, she freezes up, pulls away, or acts indifferent. That's not confusion, that's defense. Now, why does this matter? Because if you're the kind of man who values clarity, and most men do, then these moments will feel like emotional whiplash. You'll think, what's going on here? One day she's joking and laughing and clearly enjoying my company, and the next she's treating me like we barely know each other. And the instinct is to either pull away or press harder. And both of those responses can backfire if you don't understand what you're actually dealing with. What you're seeing is often a woman wrestling with her own desire, wanting connection, intimacy, or even just your presence, but not wanting to be the one to reveal it first. Sometimes that comes from pride, sometimes from fear, and sometimes from upbringing or cultural programming. But regardless of the source, the pattern remains. The signal comes out, then it gets buried. That's the push and pull you're feeling. And here's where things get interesting. If you can learn to stay grounded when this happens, not chasing her when she withdraws, and not getting offended when she plays it cool, you create the emotional space where her own feelings can rise to the surface without pressure. That's when clarity begins to form, not because you dragged it out of her, but because you gave her a sense of safety that allowed her to stop hiding. It's in those unpredictable fluctuations, those contradictions in tone, attention, and engagement, that her desire is leaking out. If she truly didn't care, you wouldn't see those shifts at all. She'd be consistent, neutral, even indifferent, but inconsistency is a sign of inner tension, and tension implies interest, often deep interest, restrained by fear, shame, or hesitation. So the next time you encounter mixed signals from a woman, don't jump to conclusions. Don't assume it's rejection just because it's not delivered in a straightforward package. Pay attention to the timing, the context, and the subtle energy shifts. Watch how she acts when she thinks you're not looking. You may find that what looks like indifference is actually longing in disguise. Wrapped in layers of hesitation, she's not yet ready to strip away. You can tell a lot about what a person truly feels, not by what they say, but by how their body behaves in real time. Words are easy to craft, easy to control. They can be filtered, revised, masked, but the body betrays what the heart is trying to hide. When a woman craves you but doesn't want that craving to be obvious, when she's holding back, her body language will often expose her before she even realizes it. She might keep her words neutral or even a bit cold. She might try to maintain distance emotionally, keep things on the surface, but her eyes will linger a little too long. Her pupils may dilate. Her posture may shift subtly toward you even when she's trying to appear disengaged. These are the kinds of details people miss because they're too focused on the verbal conversation rather than the full interaction that's happening underneath. When someone is trying not to reveal desire, their body gets caught between two impulses, the impulse to connect and the impulse to protect, and that tension creates micro signals. You'll see it in how she fidgets when you speak, or how she brushes her hair behind her ear when she's listening. You might notice her mirroring your movements without realizing it, adjusting her position just after you do, adopting a similar tone or rhythm. That kind of mirroring is a subconscious form of attunement. It's not deliberate, it's instinctive, and it often points to deep, if hidden, attraction. What's fascinating is how often we're trained to ignore this kind of information. We're told not to read into things. We're told to just listen to what she says. But that advice only works when a person is being honest with themselves, which isn't always the case. A woman may genuinely not want to show her interest for any number of reasons. Maybe she's afraid of coming on too strong. Maybe she doesn't think she deserves the connection she desires. Or maybe she's still unsure if you're the kind of man who can actually hold space for what she feels. And so she guards her words, but her body, especially in moments when she's not fully on, it starts to reveal what's underneath. Pay attention to how she acts when she thinks you're not watching. How does she look at you when you're not speaking? What happens when the conversation pauses? Does she look away, or does she linger in the silence? Silence can be incredibly revealing. In silence, the mask often slips. Now, it's important not to mistake friendliness or basic politeness for attraction. But if you start noticing patterns, subtle, consistent signs that her body seems drawn to you even when her words are saying nothing special, that's where the truth often lies, especially if those signs show up in environments where she's usually composed. A quick glance when you walk into a room, a sudden shift in posture when you sit beside her, a tension in her voice when she addresses you, as if she's trying to maintain control. These are the kinds of cues that don't lie because they happen too quickly to be manipulated. So many men miss these signals because they are expecting overt signs. They want the confession, the clear flirtation, the direct compliment, but real attraction, especially when it's being hidden, doesn't usually arrive in such neat packaging. It arrives through hesitation, through heat in the cheeks, through quiet tension in the shoulders. The body whispers what the voice won't admit. Attraction, especially when it's repressed or hidden, doesn't always show up in words or even overt gestures. More often, it leaks out through behavior that appears casual, even accidental, but isn't. One of the clearest signs that a woman is craving you, even if she's trying to suppress that feeling, is that she keeps finding reasons to be around you. And not just in obvious or overtly flirty ways. I'm talking about the little coincidences that start piling up. She shows up to events you're attending, asks for help with something trivial, strikes up conversations that don't really need to happen. On the surface, it all seems innocent, normal, but if you look closely, you'll see a pattern she's orbiting. Now, people don't hover near what they're indifferent to. They don't put themselves in the proximity of things they don't want more of. So when someone keeps finding ways to be in your space, that's not random. That's strategy disguised as spontaneity. The craving is there. It's just covered with plausible deniability. I didn't know you'd be here. Can you take a look at this for me? I figured you'd know how to help with this. These aren't just logistical interactions, they're bids for closeness. She's seeking connection while protecting herself from the vulnerability of openly asking for it. That kind of behavior is deeply human. When we desire something that feels dangerous, or when we're not sure if it's safe to fully want it, we'll try to get close to it in roundabout ways. She might convince herself she just enjoys your company or values your opinion. And maybe that's partially true, but more often than not, what she's doing is feeding the desire in small, controlled doses, so it doesn't overwhelm her. It's the emotional equivalent of standing near a fire without getting burned. And the closer she can get to you without exposing her intentions, the more she gets to satisfy that craving, without stepping into the risk of rejection or emotional vulnerability. That's what makes it such a tricky thing to spot. Because if you take her behavior at face value, you'll miss what it's really about. You'll think she just needed help, or she's just friendly. But repeated exposure that she initiates without clear necessity, especially when paired with subtle tension, nervousness, or changes in demeanor, that's not friendliness. That's emotional gravity pulling her toward you. And here's something else to think about. Sometimes the requests for your presence will seem oddly specific or unnecessary. She might ask you to help her with something she could easily manage herself, or invite you to something she already knows you might decline. What matters isn't the content of the interaction. It's the intent behind it. It's the invitation. She's offering you a bridge, and it may be small, it may be subtle, but it's there. Now, this doesn't mean you should assume that every time a woman talks to you, she's secretly craving you. That would be absurd. But when the effort becomes regular, when she goes out of her way to be in your field more than chance would reasonably allow, and especially when it's wrapped in a certain nervous energy, then you're likely seeing someone who wants to be close, but doesn't want to show the full extent of that desire. And if you can see that for what it is, not judge it, not mock it, but simply notice it, you create a kind of space where that hidden craving can begin to breathe, where she can begin to feel safe enough to stop circling and start connecting. One of the more surprising signs that a woman is craving you, but hiding it, is how she reacts when other women enter the picture, especially women who appear to be getting your attention. Now, if she's truly indifferent to you, if there's no attraction, no hidden desire, then it really wouldn't matter who you're talking to or how closely. But if there's something beneath the surface, if there's craving laced with denial, then watch how quickly that indifference can turn into subtle irritation, withdrawal, or even passive-aggressive behavior. That shift, those reactions, they often tell you more than her words ever will. It won't always look dramatic. In fact, if she's trying to suppress her feelings, she'll likely do everything she can to make it seem like she's unaffected. But that's where the signal lives, in the dissonance. She may smile, nod, even pretend to support your interaction with someone else, but underneath, her tone tightens, her gaze sharpens, or she suddenly goes quiet. That quietness isn't peace, it's suppression. She's trying to regulate an emotional reaction she doesn't want to admit she's having. This is a dynamic rooted in the tension between desire and fear of vulnerability. If a woman is craving you but doesn't feel safe expressing that, then the presence of another woman who might get what she wants stirs something primal. Competition, jealousy, insecurity. Not because she's petty or possessive, but because that desire she's trying to hide gets threatened. It gets exposed by contrast. You see, when someone else starts receiving your attention, especially in a way that's warm or flirtatious, it forces her to feel the absence of what she secretly wants, and that absence stings. Now, in moments like this, the real indicator isn't always jealousy in the typical sense. It's the way she changes. Does her energy shift? Does she suddenly become colder with you, more sarcastic, more distant? Or does she go the opposite way? Does she try harder to engage you, to pull your attention back in subtle ways? Maybe she becomes overly sweet, compliments you more, or inserts herself into the conversation with a sort of forced casualness. Either reaction is a signal. What matters is the shift, the pivot in behavior in response to competition. That shift is what reveals the truth, and here's the interesting part. She might not even be fully aware of what she's doing. It's not always calculated. Sometimes it's automatic. That's what makes it so revealing. People can fake words. They can even fake facial expressions, but they can't fake the physiological response of discomfort. Her body will tighten, her timing will change, she may interrupt more or suddenly disappear for a while. All of it is driven by an internal contradiction. She wants you, but she's trying not to want you, and now someone else is threatening to take what she's barely allowing herself to reach for. And of course, she might rationalize it later. She might say she didn't like that woman's personality, or she found the interaction inappropriate. But the deeper reason, the emotional root, is often much simpler. It's the pain of seeing someone else treated the way she wishes she could be treated by you. And when that pain shows up, even briefly, it leaves a trace. So if you notice a woman reacting in subtle but consistent ways when you're engaging with other women, if her demeanor changes, if her presence sharpens or fades, it might not be jealousy in the obvious sense. It might be a signal that she's craving you deeply and just hasn't found the words or the courage to say it out loud. There's something that happens when a woman feels something for you but doesn't want to admit it, not even to herself. You'll notice she starts overthinking around you. She second guesses her words. She edits herself, sometimes mid-sentence. And it's not because she doesn't know what to say. It's because she knows exactly what she feels, and she's working overtime to make sure you don't see it. That kind of self-monitoring, that constant internal calculation, it's a form of control. She's trying to manage how she comes across to you. She wants to appear composed, unaffected, maybe even disinterested. But the very act of trying so hard to seem casual is itself a giveaway. People who don't care don't overthink. They speak freely, they act naturally, but when there's desire underneath the surface, desire that feels too risky to express it creates friction. And that friction shows up in the way she talks to you. You might notice she hesitates before answering your questions, or she laughs a little too quickly at something you say, then immediately looks away, like she caught herself being too open. She might type a message to you and then delete it, or send something and follow it with, "Sorry, that was dumb," or "Ignore me, I'm being weird." That's not randomness, that's emotional editing. It's her trying to control a narrative while fighting off the parts of her that want to be seen. And the reason this matters, why it's worth paying attention to, is because it tells you something about where she's at emotionally. If she were neutral, if she didn't feel anything, she wouldn't be wrapped up in this internal dialogue. She wouldn't be preoccupied with how she's being perceived, but craving, especially craving that's being hidden, makes people self-conscious. It puts them on high alert because part of them wants connection and part of them fears exposure. That battle plays out in the small hesitations, the awkward laughs, the overcorrections. This is especially true when it comes to texting or messaging. Written communication gives people more time to filter themselves, and if a woman is craving you but trying to keep that under wraps, you'll often see her messages swing between warmth and detachment. She might write a long, thoughtful message one day, then give you a cold one-word reply the next. And what's happening there is emotional recalibration. She lets a little too much of her interest slip through, then panics, pulls back, tries to restore balance by acting indifferent. But what she doesn't realize is that the inconsistency itself is the tell. That push and pull, that strange rhythm, it's not about her being confusing. It's about her being conflicted. She wants to be close, but she's afraid of what closeness might reveal about her own feelings. So she masks it with overthinking, with forced normalcy, with all the subtle ways people hide in plain sight. And here's the irony. The more she tries to seem like she doesn't care, the more obvious it becomes that she does. Because indifference isn't something you have to manufacture. You don't have to rehearse it, you just feel it. But when someone is carefully curating their words, when they're too polished, too restrained, it means they're performing something, hiding something they're not ready to admit, even to themselves. So when you see a woman constantly editing herself around you second, guessing, retracting, over-explaining, it's not insecurity alone. It's often desire, tangled with fear, wrapped in a need to protect herself from being seen too clearly. One of the most paradoxical signs that a woman is craving you, but trying to keep that craving hidden, is emotional defensiveness, not hostility, not open aggression, subtle defensiveness. A kind of guarded tension that shows up when conversations edge too close to anything personal, vulnerable, or intimate. It's as if there's a protective wall she's reinforcing, and she doesn't even fully know why. You might say something kind to her, something genuine, perhaps a compliment or a moment of recognition, and instead of receiving it openly, she brushes it off, downplays it, or even challenges it. Why would you say that? You don't really mean that. It's not that she doesn't want to hear those words. It's that hearing them triggers something inside her that she's not ready to confront. The truth is, When someone is trying not to feel something, especially something as destabilizing as desire, any gesture that threatens to make that feeling conscious is immediately met with resistance. That defensiveness, in many cases, isn't rejection. It's a form of emotional self-protection. It's the nervous system saying, "This is dangerous, this is too close, you can't let this in." And again, it won't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. You ask a simple question, one that touches on how she feels, and she dodges it, changes the subject, makes a joke, or gives a surface-level answer that deflects rather than reveals. That kind of avoidance is a shield, not because she doesn't want to be known, but because being known by you would mean admitting, first to herself, then to you, just how much you matter to her. This is what hidden craving looks like in action. It's not always warm, it's not always sweet. Sometimes it shows up as a kind of cool distance, even minor irritation. You might say something harmless and she reacts sharply like you've struck a nerve. But that sharpness, that edge, it often means you've brushed against the very thing she's trying to conceal, the desire she hasn't given herself permission to feel out loud. What makes this dynamic so complex is that the craving itself is very real. It's not manufactured. She wants you. She thinks about you, but maybe she's not sure what you feel, or maybe she's been hurt before and she's already rehearsing how to keep herself safe in case this all falls apart. So she stays on guard. She keeps the armor on, and when that armor slips, even a little, she rushes to fix it. There's a line many people walk between desire and defense. It's a fragile line, full of contradictions. A woman might show up in your life with laughter, energy, attention, and then retreat the moment it feels too real, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares more than she wants to admit, and caring means risking exposure. It means risking pain, and sometimes that's more terrifying than the desire itself. So if you notice that tension, if you find yourself in conversations that feel like they should go deeper, but always hit an invisible wall, it's worth asking why. Not accusing, not pressing, just noticing. That guardedness might not be coldness. It might be the final mask between what she's showing and what she's truly feeling. And if you look closely, if you listen not just to her words but to her hesitations, her reactions, the walls she builds and the cracks in those walls will begin to see that what's being hidden is often exactly what matters most.